My girlfriend looked me dead in the eye and said she wasn't in love with me anymore, but she wanted to keep living together as roommates. She wanted my salary paying the rent while she played the field. So, I became the perfect roommate. I stopped paying for her food, cut off her phone, and watched her life crumble until she begged me to take her back. Little did she know, the ultimate payback was just getting started. Thank you for being here. Please comment the letter Y below so I know you are ready, and sit back while I tell you the whole story. It was a Tuesday night, and the apartment was quiet except for the low hum of the television. I was 28 years old, working as a software engineer, and I thought my life was perfectly on track. My girlfriend, Lily, was 26. We had been together for 3 years and living together for the last 18 months. I loved her. I truly did. I was the kind of guy who believed in loyalty, in building a foundation, and in taking care of the people who matter to you. I was sitting on the couch, reviewing some code on my laptop for a major project at work. Lily was curled up on the other end of the couch, scrolling through her phone. The television was playing some home renovation show we usually watch together, but neither of us was really paying attention. I closed my laptop, rubbed my tired eyes, and leaned over to kiss her goodnight. I had an early morning meeting and needed to get some sleep. She didn't lean in. She stiffened, pulled back, and gave me a look I will never forget. It wasn't anger. It wasn't sadness. It was complete and utter indifference. She picked up the remote, muted the television, and turned her body to face me. The silence in the room suddenly felt heavy, like the air pressure had dropped before a massive storm. "Mason," she said, her voice completely flat. "We need to talk." Any man who has been in a relationship knows that phrase. It never leads to anything good. I sat back down, the exhaustion of the workday instantly vanishing, replaced by a cold knot in my stomach. "What's going on?" I asked. She didn't hesitate. She didn't look away or fidget. She just delivered the blow right to my chest. "I like you as a person, Mason. I really do. And I enjoy living with you. But I am not in love with you anymore. I haven't been for months." I sat there stunned. The words echoed in my head, but my brain refused to process them. We hadn't been fighting. There were no screaming matches, no slammed doors. Just a quiet, slow drift that I had completely missed because I was too busy working to provide for us. "I wanted to be honest with you," she continued, her tone so calm it was almost clinical. "I respect you too much to keep pretending. It's just not there anymore." I looked around the living room, at the couch I bought, the television I paid for, the rug she picked out that I put on my credit card. My mind was racing, trying to find a logical explanation. "So, what does this mean?" I finally managed to ask, my voice sounding hollow even to my own ears. "Are you moving out?" Lily shook her head, a small, practical smile forming on her lips. "No, I don't want to do that. I was hoping we could just continue living together as friends. We work well as roommates, Mason. There is no reason to mess up a good thing. We have a great apartment, a comfortable routine. I value our friendship, and I don't want to lose that by making things complicated." I stared at her. She wanted to break my heart, end our relationship, but keep the roof over her head that my salary paid for. She wanted the financial security I provided, the lifestyle I maintained, without any of the commitment or love. It was the most selfish, calculated proposal I had ever heard in my life. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. The shock was too deep for tears. I just stood up slowly. "I need to think about this," I said. I turned my back on her, walked into the bedroom, and closed the door. I lay down on the bed in the dark, staring up at the ceiling. The woman I had planned to marry, the woman I had supported through thick and thin, had just demoted me to an ATM machine and a roommate. About 20 minutes later, the room lit up. It was our shared iPad sitting on the nightstand. It buzzed once, then twice, then 5 times in rapid succession. I rolled over and picked it up. Lily's Apple ID was synced to the device. She was typing in a group chat with her best friends. I shouldn't have looked, but the screen was glaring in the dark room, and her name was right there. I tapped the screen. What I saw in those messages changed the trajectory of my entire life. It was the moment the man who loved Lily died, and the man who would tear her world apart was born. Before I tell you what was in those messages, you need to understand how we got to that dark bedroom. You need to understand what I sacrificed for this woman, and why her betrayal cut so deep. When I first met Lily 3 years ago, she was a completely different person. Or at least, she played the part of a different person flawlessly. We met at a local coffee shop. I was working on my laptop, and she accidentally spilled her drink on my table. She was incredibly apologetic, offering to pay for my dry cleaning, insisting on buying me a new coffee. We started talking and we just clicked. At the time, Lily was fiercely independent. She was 23, fresh out of college, working as a junior graphic designer for a mid-sized marketing firm downtown. She had her own tiny studio apartment on the other side of the city. She paid her own rent, handled her own bills, and drove a beat-up Honda Civic that she maintained herself. She never asked me for a dime. In fact, she insisted on splitting the bill on our first 3 dates. That independence was exactly what attracted me to her. I grew up working class. My dad was a mechanic and my mom worked retail. They taught me the value of a hard-earned dollar. I busted my back in college, taking out loans and working night shifts at a warehouse to get my degree in computer science. By the time I met Lily, I was doing very well for myself. I had landed a high-paying job as a software engineer, and my salary was far more than I needed. But I lived simply. I drove a reliable truck, wore plain clothes, and saved aggressively. I didn't want a woman who loved my wallet. I wanted a partner who loved me. So I kept my financial status quiet. I told her I made a decent living, but I never mentioned the massive stock options or the aggressive investment portfolio I was building. For the first year and a half, things were perfect. We went on hiking trips, cooked dinners together in her tiny kitchen, and talked about the future. She told me about her dreams of starting her own design agency. I told her about my goal of running my own tech firm. We were a team. Then the economy took a dip, and her marketing firm downsized. Lily was one of the first people let go. She was devastated. She came over to my place, crying, terrified about how she was going to pay her rent and keep her head above water. That was the moment the dynamic shifted. As a man, my instinct was to protect and provide. I hated seeing her stressed. I told her to pack her bags. My apartment was a spacious 2-bedroom place closer to downtown. I told her she could move in with me, focus on her freelance graphic design work, and not worry about the rent until she got back on her feet. She hugged me, crying tears of relief. She promised it would only be temporary. She promised she would contribute as soon as she landed a few big clients. I believed her. I loved her, and when you love someone, you step up. You carry the weight when they can't. So she moved in. First, she tried. She used the last of her savings to buy groceries once in a while. She helped keep the place clean. But the freelance graphic design market was brutal. Months went by, and she was barely making enough to cover her personal credit card minimums, let alone contribute to the household. I didn't care. I had just received a massive promotion at work, elevating me to a senior lead engineer. My salary skyrocketed. I was making more money than I knew what to do with. But again, I kept the exact numbers to myself. I told her I got a small bump in pay and that I could comfortably handle all our living expenses. I took over everything. I paid the rent for our 2-bedroom apartment. I paid the electric bill, the water bill, the internet. I bought all the groceries. When her beat-up Honda Civic needed new brakes, I quietly paid the mechanic. I didn't want her to feel guilty, so I just acted like it was no big deal. I was investing in our future. I thought I was building a life with my future wife. I thought she would appreciate the sacrifice, the safety net I had spread out for her. But humans are funny creatures. When you give someone a luxury for free, they are grateful for a week. After a month, it becomes a habit. After a year, it becomes an expectation. And that is exactly what happened with Lily. The independent, hardworking girl I met slowly vanished, replaced by someone who felt entitled to the life I was working 60 hours a week to provide. The transition didn't happen overnight. It was a slow fade. It started with the little things. In the beginning, when I went grocery shopping, I would buy the basics. But soon, Lily started leaving lists on the kitchen counter. Not just lists for milk and bread, but specific expensive brands. She wanted organic, grass-fed beef. She wanted the $10 jars of almond butter. She wanted the imported Italian sparkling water. I didn't complain. I grabbed the cart, walked down the aisles, and loaded up everything she asked for. I swiped my card at the register, watching the grocery bills double, then triple. Then came the phone bill. She was complaining one evening about her service provider overcharging her. I told her it was ridiculous for us to be on separate plans. I called my provider, added her line to my account, and upgraded her to the newest iPhone while I was at it. I told her it was cheaper this way. I never asked her for her share of the monthly bill. It just became another automatic deduction from my checking account. Her car insurance was next. Her policy lapsed because she forgot to pay it. She came to me in a panic, terrified she would get pulled over. I calmly went online, added her car to my premium policy, and paid the 6-month premium upfront. I was managing the entire household. If a light bulb burned out, I changed it. If the sink leaked, I fixed it. I managed our social calendar. If we were going out with our friends on a Friday night, I was the one calling the restaurant to make reservations. And when the check came, I was the one pulling out my wallet to pay for everyone's appetizers and drinks. Lily stopped thanking me. She stopped mentioning her plan to get a full-time job. She slept in until 10 o'clock every morning while I was up at 6, drinking a quick cup of coffee before fighting traffic to get to the office. She would spend her days networking at local cafes, which mostly consisted of drinking expensive lattes and scrolling through social media. The worst part was how she started treating my time and my money as if they were hers by right. One Saturday, I had just finished a brutal week at work. I was exhausted and looking forward to watching a football game on the couch. Lily came out of the bedroom dressed to the nines. "Get up," she said, tossing her purse over her shoulder. "I invited Qley and Sarah to that new seafood place on the waterfront for lunch. We need to go." I blinked at her. "You invited them? You didn't ask me." "I shouldn't have to ask you, Mason," she sighed, rolling her eyes like I was a child acting out. "It's the weekend. We are going out. Hurry up and get dressed." I swallowed my frustration. I put on my shoes, drove us to the restaurant, and sat there for 2 hours listening to her and her friends gossip about people I didn't know. When the bill came, over $300 for seafood towers and mimosas, Lily didn't even reach for her purse. She just looked at me expectantly. I handed the waiter my credit card. Qley and Sarah thanked Lily for the meal. Lily smiled and accepted the thanks, as if she had paid for it herself. I was becoming a ghost in my own relationship. A very well-funded, hard-working ghost. I provided the structure, the money, and the logistics, and she provided nothing but her presence. And then, there was the issue of my career. I was rising fast in the tech world. I was leading teams, securing massive contracts. But Lily didn't care. Whenever I tried to talk to her about a breakthrough I had at work, her eyes would glaze over. She would quickly change the subject to her friend's new designer handbag or some drama on reality television. She viewed my job solely as the mechanism that funded her lifestyle, not as something I was passionate about or proud of. I convinced myself this was just a rough patch. I told myself that once her freelance business finally took off, she would regain her pride and our partnership would balance out. I was blinded by my own loyalty. I was so committed to being a good man, a reliable provider, that I completely failed to see I was being taken for an absolute ride. I was enabling a monster of entitlement, and that monster was about to introduce me to the people who created her. If you want to know why a person acts the way they do, look at their parents. 2 years into our relationship, Lily's parents, Robert and Susan, moved closer to the city. That's when the real nightmare began, and the disrespect was cranked up to a level I had never experienced. Robert was a middle manager at an insurance firm who wore cheap suits and acted like he was the CEO of a Fortune 500 company. Susan was a housewife who spent her days trying to project an image of old money wealth that they absolutely did not possess. They worshipped Lily. To them, she was the golden child, a princess who deserved the absolute best the world had to offer. And in their eyes, I was most certainly not the best. They invited us to dinner at a high-end steakhouse downtown. I knew exactly how this would play out. Robert would order the most expensive bottles of wine, complain about the service, and then mysteriously forget his wallet or excuse himself to the restroom when the check arrived. I had already accepted that I would be paying the bill. We sat down, and the interrogation began before the appetizers even arrived. "So, Mason," Robert said, swirling his red wine and looking at me down his nose. "Still typing away at a keyboard all day? Any plans to move into real management? A position with actual authority and a real salary?" I gripped my fork tightly under the table. I was managing a team of 20 engineers and my salary was likely triple what Robert made. But I kept my mouth shut. "I enjoy the engineering side, Robert. It pays the bills." Susan scoffed, a sharp, ugly sound. "Paying the bills isn't everything, Mason. Lily is a creative soul. She needs a certain lifestyle. She needs to be surrounded by culture and luxury, not just scraping by in an apartment. We live in a luxury high-rise downtown, Susan," I pointed out, my voice tight, "and I pay for all of it." Lily kicked me under the table. "Stop it, Mason. Don't be rude to my mother." "I'm not being rude," I said, looking at Lily. "I'm just stating a fact." Robert leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. "We ran into the Henderson family at the country club last week. You remember their son, Julian? The one who went to an Ivy League school. He just got back from Europe. His grandfather passed away, left him a massive inheritance. The kid is set for life, has his own trust fund. That's the kind of security a young woman needs." The mention of the keyword inheritance wasn't subtle. It was a direct insult. He was parading this Julian guy in front of me, making it clear that old money and trust funds were what they valued, not the blue-collar work ethic I used to build my career. "Julian is very handsome, too," Susan added, looking pointedly at Lily. "Always dressed impeccably. He drives a Ferrari now, Such a successful young man." I looked at Lily, expecting her to defend me, to tell her parents that I treated her well, that I supported her entirely. But she just looked down at her plate, a small blush creeping up her neck. She didn't say a word. She let them disrespect me, right to my face, while I sat there paying for the $100 steaks they were chewing. Later that evening, after I had dropped $500 on their dinner, we were driving home. I gripped the steering wheel, my knuckles white. "Why didn't you say anything?" I asked Lily, the anger finally bleeding into my voice. "They sat there insulting my job, insulting my ability to provide for you, and you said nothing. They practically told you to date this Julian guy right in front of me." Lily sighed loudly, rolling down the window. "Oh, stop being so sensitive, Mason. They just want what's best for me. They worry about my future. And honestly, you could put a little more effort into your appearance around them. You wore jeans to a steakhouse. I wore dark denim and a blazer," I shot back. "And my appearance just paid for their dinner." "Money isn't everything," she snapped. "God, you are so obsessed with money. You always hold it over my head that you pay the rent. It's suffocating." I slammed on the brakes as we hit a red light, staring at her in absolute disbelief. I never threw my financial support in her face. Never. I hid it, minimized it, precisely so she wouldn't feel suffocated. But to her, my hard work was just a given, an expectation, and her parents' disrespect was justified because I didn't come from old money. That night, a crack formed in the foundation of my love for her, a deep, jagged crack. And that crack was about to be busted wide open by the arrival of the man her parents wouldn't stop talking about. The name Julian started popping up more and more after that dinner. It started innocently enough. Lily mentioned that she had run into him at a coffee shop downtown. Then she said he had hired her to design a logo for a new venture capital firm he was starting with his inheritance money. Suddenly, she was incredibly motivated to work. She started dressing up to go to these design meetings. The sweatpants and messy buns were replaced by designer dresses she bought on my credit card and expensive perfume. She would leave the apartment at noon and not return until 8 o'clock at night, smelling like expensive men's cologne and gin. I'm not a jealous man by nature, but I am an observant one. I noticed the changes. I noticed how she guarded her phone. She used to leave it unlocked on the kitchen counter. Now it went with her everywhere, even into the bathroom. I noticed how she would quickly minimize the screen on her laptop when I walked into the room. One Saturday afternoon, I was walking back from the gym. Our apartment building had a massive underground parking garage. As I walked down the ramp, I heard the distinct, aggressive roar of a sports car engine. A bright red Ferrari came around the corner, taking the turn way too fast. The driver slammed on the brakes, the tires squealing on the concrete, and pulled into the loading zone right near the elevator banks. I stopped walking. The passenger door opened, and Lily stepped out. She was laughing, tossing her hair over her shoulder. She was wearing a dress I had never seen before, and she looked happier than she had in months. The driver stepped out. He was exactly the kind of guy Robert and Susan had described. Slicked back hair, a tailored suit that cost more than my first car, and a smug, arrogant smile plastered across his face. Julian. He walked around the car, leaned against the hood, and pulled Lily in by the waist. They didn't kiss, but the physical proximity, the way she rested her hands on his chest, was not the body language of a freelance designer and her client. I stood in the shadows behind a concrete pillar, my blood turning to ice. I watched them talk for a few minutes before Lily waved goodbye and headed toward the elevators. Julian got back into his Ferrari, revved the engine obnoxiously loud, and sped out of the garage. When I walked into our apartment 10 minutes later, Lily was in the kitchen, pouring a glass of water. "Hey," she said casually. "How was the gym?" "Good," I replied, keeping my voice perfectly level. "How was your meeting with Julian?" She didn't flinch. She was a spectacular liar. "Oh, it was fine. We finally finalized the color palette for his brand. Took forever." "Did he drop you off?" I asked. "Yeah, we were working at a cafe near his place, so he offered to give me a ride back so I didn't have to take an Uber." She lied right to my face without missing a beat. I didn't confront her right then. I needed absolute proof, not just suspicion. As a software engineer, I deal in data, in hard facts. I wasn't going to blow up my life over a feeling in my gut. I needed evidence. I got my first piece of hard evidence 3 days later. Lily was in the shower. She had left her designer trench coat draped over the back of a dining chair. As I walked past, I bumped the chair, and a piece of paper fluttered out of the coat pocket and landed on the hardwood floor. I picked it up. It was a parking ticket from the city. But it wasn't for Lily's Honda. It was a ticket issued to a vehicle with a license plate I didn't recognize, for parking in a red zone downtown. The date on the ticket was from the previous Saturday. The exact same Saturday Lily told me she was taking a train out to the suburbs to visit her aunt for a family emergency. She hadn't been with her aunt. She had been downtown, in a car that likely belonged to Julian, getting a parking ticket while I was sitting at home, worried sick about her family situation. The puzzle pieces were snapping together, creating a picture of ultimate betrayal. She was using my apartment as a home base, using my credit cards to fund her wardrobe, using my salary to keep herself comfortable, while she ran around town auditioning a wealthier, flashier replacement. And that brings us back to that Tuesday night. The night she told me she wasn't in love with me anymore. The night she asked to just be roommates. The night the iPad lit up in the dark bedroom. I lay on the bed, staring at the glowing screen of the iPad. The group chat was titled Girls' Night Out, featuring Lily, Qley, and Sarah. I had never snooped through her devices before. I believed in privacy. But she had just shattered our relationship and asked to live off my dime as a roommate. All bets were off. I unlocked the iPad. The messages were flowing in real time. I read them, and with every word, the remaining warmth in my heart turned to absolute frost. "Qley, did you do it? Did you tell him?" "Lily, yes. I just told him. I said I wasn't in love with him anymore but that I wanted to stay roommates. Sarah. OMG. How did he react? Did he freak out? Lily. No, he just stood there looking like a pathetic puppy and said he needed to think about it. He went to the bedroom. Qley. Are you sure this is a good idea, Lil? Why not just break up and move out? Lily. Are you crazy? Move out where? Julian isn't ready to have me move in yet. His condo is being renovated. And I am not moving back in with my parents. Mason pays for everything here. The rent, the food, my car insurance. Why would I give up a free ride? Sarah. Haha, savage. But won't it be awkward living with your ex? Lily. I don't care if it's awkward. It's practical. Mason is a pushover. He's a good guy but he's weak. He'll agree to it because he secretly hopes I'll change my mind and fall back in love with him. I'll just play nice, keep my free apartment, and save up my money until Julian is ready to make it official. Qley. I don't know. It feels kinda messed up to use him like that. Lily. Oh please. He's a poor loser IT guy. He should be grateful a girl like me even gave him 3 years of my life. Julian is taking me to the Hamptons next weekend. Mason thinks I'm going to a design conference. This roommate thing is going to work perfectly. I took a screenshot of the entire conversation. Then I forwarded the screenshots to my own secure email address and deleted the evidence of my sent mail. I set the iPad back on the nightstand exactly how I found it. I didn't feel heartbroken anymore. The pain was gone, burned away by a cold, calculating rage. She didn't just fall out of love with me. She was actively plotting to drain my resources to fund her affair with another man. She thought I was a weak, pathetic pushover. She thought she was the smartest person in the room. I lay there in the dark, my jaw clenched so tight my teeth ached. She wanted a roommate? Fine. I would give her a roommate. But she was about to learn that there are rules to being a roommate. Rules involving money, boundaries, and consequences. The next morning, I walked out of the bedroom dressed for work. Lily was sitting at the kitchen island, sipping her expensive organic coffee, looking nervous. Did you think about what I said? She asked, putting her mug down. I looked at her, truly looking at her for the first time without the blinders of love. I saw the selfishness in her eyes, the calculation behind her fake, soft voice. I said calmly. And I agree. We make good roommates. Breaking the lease would be expensive and complicated. We can continue living here as friends. Separate bedrooms, separate lives. The relief that washed over her face was sickening. She actually smiled. Oh, Mason, thank you. I knew you would be mature about this. This is for the best, you'll see. Yeah, I said, grabbing my briefcase. It's definitely for the best. I walked out the door and headed to my office. I had a lot of work to do, and I wasn't just talking about writing software code. I called my best friend, Elijah. Elijah was a corporate lawyer and one of the sharpest guys I knew. He was also the only person on earth who knew my actual financial status. Hey, I said when he picked up. Lily broke up with me last night. Damn, man. I'm sorry, Elijah said, his voice instantly dropping into serious mode. Do you need me to come over? Help you pack her stuff? No, I said, a grim smile forming on my face. She's not moving out. She wants to be roommates so she can keep living off my salary while she dates a guy named Julian who drives a leased Ferrari. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Elijah knew me. He knew that tone of voice. Mason, what are you going to do? I need you to pull some records for me, I said, getting into my truck. I need a full background check on a guy named Julian. And Elijah, bring the property deed and the LLC documents to the bar tonight. It's time to prepare the eviction notices. Before I could execute my plan, I had to deal with the immediate fallout of my new living situation. I needed to establish the new reality, but I had to do it quietly, methodically. I couldn't tip my hand too early. That evening, I arrived back at my apartment building after a long day at the office. Our building, the Grand Horizon, was a luxury high-rise with a beautiful marble lobby, a 24-hour concierge, and a strict security system. You needed an electronic keycard to access the elevators and the parking garage. I walked up to the glass security doors and swiped my keycard against the reader. Beep. Red light. Access denied. I frowned. I wiped the card on my pants and swiped it again. Red light. I walked over to the concierge desk. Matthew, the building manager, was leaning against the counter, chatting with one of the security guards. Matthew was a sleazy, arrogant guy in his mid-30s who wore too much cologne and always looked at the female residents a little too long. I never liked him, but I always treated him with professional courtesy. "Hey Matthew," I said, holding up my card. "My keycard isn't working. Can you reset it?" Matthew slowly turned to look at me. He didn't stand up straight. He just leaned heavily against the marble desk, a nasty, condescending smirk spreading across his face. "Sorry, Mason," he said, dragging out my name. "I deactivated your card about an hour ago." I narrowed my eyes. "Excuse me? Why would you do that?" Matthew chuckled, looking at the security guard as if sharing an inside joke. "Well, Lily came down here crying this afternoon. She said you two broke up, and that you were being completely unreasonable and aggressive. She said she felt unsafe with you having unrestricted access to the apartment, seeing as she's the primary leaseholder." I stared at him. The sheer audacity of the lie was breathtaking. "She is not the primary leaseholder, Matthew. Both our names are on that lease. Actually, she showed me the paperwork," Matthew said smoothly, crossing his arms. "She's the one who interacts with management. She's the one who hands in the rent checks. As far as I'm concerned, it's her apartment. She slipped me a nice little tip to ensure her peace of mind. So, until she comes down here and personally authorizes me to reactivate your card, you are locked out, buddy." My jaw tightened. A vein throbbed in my temple. Lily had actually bribed the building manager to lock me out of my own home, forcing me to crawl to her and beg for access. She was trying to establish dominance, to remind me that she held the power and I was just the guy who paid the bills. "You accepted a bribe from a resident to illegally lock another resident out of their leased property?" I asked, my voice dangerously low. Matthew laughed dismissively. "Call it a service fee for emotional distress management. Look man, don't make a scene. Just go buy her some flowers, apologize for whatever you did, and she'll let you back in. Women, right? They just want to feel in control." I looked at Matthew. He had no idea who he was talking to. He had no idea the colossal mistake he had just made. "Reactivate the card, Matthew," I said, leaning closer to the desk. "Now, or what?" Matthew sneered, standing up to his full height, trying to intimidate me. "You gonna hit me? I'll have you arrested and banned from the premises permanently. You're just a tech geek. Don't play tough guy with me. Go sit in the lobby until your girlfriend decides she's done punishing you." I didn't hit him. I didn't yell. I just pulled out my phone, typed a quick message to Lily, and hit send. Message: "I'm in the lobby. Matthew deactivated my card. Come down here and fix this, or I cancel the credit card tied to your autopay for the rent right now." Less than 3 minutes later, the elevator doors dinged open, and Lily hurried into the lobby. She looked flustered, her eyes darting between me and Matthew. "Matthew, what are you doing?" she snapped, acting completely innocent. "I told you to just put a temporary hold on it, not lock him out entirely." Matthew looked confused, realizing he had been thrown under the bus. "But you said, just reactivate it," Lily demanded, playing the role of the stressed, overwhelmed woman perfectly. Matthew scowled, typed aggressively on his keyboard, and swiped my card over the master reader. The light flashed green. He tossed the card across the counter at me. "There," he muttered. I picked up the card, looking dead into Matthew's eyes. "I will remember this conversation, Matthew. Every single word of it." I turned and walked toward the elevators, leaving him and Lily in the lobby. She hurried after me, stepping into the elevator just before the doors closed. "Mason, I'm so sorry," she started rambling, putting her hand on my arm. "I was just so stressed about our new arrangement, and I panicked. I didn't mean to lock you out." I looked down at her hand on my arm. Then I looked at her face. "Don't touch me, Lily, and don't ever try a power play like that again." Because I promise you, you will not like how I play the game. The doors opened to our floor, and I walked out, leaving her standing in the elevator looking genuinely terrified for the first time. The storm had officially arrived. The weekend arrived, bringing with it a fresh layer of absolute disrespect. I was sitting at the kitchen island on Saturday morning, drinking my coffee and reading the news on my tablet. I had spent the last 2 days executing the first phase of my roommate strategy, which mostly involved moving my personal belongings into the spare bedroom and putting a lock on the door. At 10 a.m., the front door swung open. Lily hadn't mentioned having company. Robert and Susan marched into the apartment, carrying shopping bags from a high-end boutique. "Lily, darling, we brought those silk pillows you wanted for the living room," Susan called out, completely ignoring my presence. Lily rushed out of her bedroom, throwing her arms around her mother. "Oh, thank you, Mom. They'll look perfect on the couch." Robert finally turned his gaze to me. He didn't offer a greeting. He just looked at me like I was a stain on the rug. "Mason, you're still here. I thought you would have the decency to pack up and find a bachelor pad by now. Isn't it a bit pathetic, lingering around after my daughter broke things off?" I took a slow sip of my coffee. "My name is on the lease, Robert. I pay the rent here. I'm not going anywhere." "Technically," Susan chimed in, walking into the kitchen and opening the refrigerator as if she owned the place. "You're just a roommate now, and frankly, it's inappropriate for you to be here all the time. Lily needs her space. She is a single woman entering a new phase of her life. She needs to be able to entertain guests without her ex-boyfriend hovering around like a dark cloud." "Guests?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. "You mean Julian?" Lily flinched, shooting a panicked look at her parents. She hadn't expected me to name-drop her secret boyfriend so casually. Robert puffed out his chest, stepping forward. "Yes, Julian. He is a sophisticated, successful young man. He comes from a good family, a wealthy family. They are looking at properties together. In fact, Julian is coming over this evening to take Lily to a charity gala. We expect you to make yourself scarce. Stay in your room or better yet, go to a sports bar. We don't want you making him uncomfortable." I set my coffee mug down. The audacity was truly a marvel to witness. They were standing in the apartment I paid for, eating the food I bought, telling me to hide in my room so the man my ex-girlfriend was using my money to impress wouldn't feel awkward. "Let me get this straight," I said, keeping my voice dangerously calm. "You want me to hide in a bedroom of the apartment I finance, so your daughter can parade her new boyfriend around the living room I furnished? Don't use that tone with me, boy," Robert snapped, his face turning red. "You should be grateful you're even allowed to stay here. You were dragging her down. You have no ambition, no pedigree. If you two had ever gotten married, it would have ended in a messy divorce within a year because you could never provide the lifestyle she requires. You couldn't even afford a decent lawyer if she decided to take you for everything you're worth." The keyword divorce hung in the air. He was literally threatening me with hypothetical legal ruin for a marriage that didn't even exist, purely to establish dominance. "Dad, stop," Lily whispered, looking genuinely uncomfortable, probably worried I would cut off the credit cards right then and there. "No, Lily," Susan interrupted, crossing her arms. "He needs to hear the truth. He's lucky you're generous enough to let him stay as a roommate. Most girls would have kicked him to the curb." Before I could respond, there was a knock at the open front door. It was Mr. and Mrs. Vance, an older, wealthy couple who lived down the hall. They were the neighborhood gossips, always impeccably dressed and always sticking their noses into other people's business. "Excuse me," Mrs. Vance said, peering into our apartment with wide, greedy eyes. "We couldn't help but overhear the shouting in the hallway. Is everything all right in here?" Susan instantly switched into high society mode. She plastered a fake smile on her face and walked toward the door. "Oh, Eleanor. Hello. Yes, everything is perfectly fine. We're just having a little family discussion. Mason here is having a tough time accepting that Lily has moved on to a better situation. He's being a bit stubborn about vacating the premises. Mr. Vance, a retired banker who wore a Rolex and sneered at anyone who rode the subway, looked at me with open disgust. Well, young man, it shows a severe lack of character to overstay your welcome. When a lady asks you to leave, a real gentleman packs his bags. Have some pride. I looked at the four of them, Robert, Susan, and the Vances, a chorus of snobs, judging me based on a lie fabricated by a woman who was currently stealing from me to fund her fake lifestyle. I didn't yell. I didn't defend myself. I just smiled. A cold, terrifying smile that wiped the smirk right off Robert's face. You're right, Mr. Vance, I said, picking up my tablet and standing up. A real gentleman knows exactly when to assert his pride. Enjoy your afternoon, everyone. Make sure you don't scratch the hardwood floors. They're expensive. I walked past them, out the front door, and headed for the elevator. I had an appointment with my lawyer, and it was time to light the fuse on this powder keg. I didn't immediately go to see my lawyer. I needed to clear my head first. I went down to the underground parking garage to grab my truck and take a long drive. The air in the garage was cool and smelled of exhaust and damp concrete. As I walked toward my reliable, 10-year-old Ford F-150, I heard the aggressive roar of an engine echoing off the concrete walls. It was that familiar, obnoxiously loud sound. A bright red Ferrari whipped around the corner, ignoring the speed limit signs painted on the pillars. It was Julian. He must have been arriving early for his big date with Lily. He saw me walking toward my truck. I know he saw me because he made eye contact. Instead of slowing down or pulling into an empty visitor spot, he accelerated. He aimed the sleek, low-profile sports car directly toward my parking space, forcing me to jump back against a concrete pillar to avoid getting hit. He slammed on the brakes at the last possible second, swerving the Ferrari hard to the right to slide into the empty spot next to my truck. But he misjudged the distance. Screech, crunch. The horrifying sound of tearing metal and scraping paint echoed through the garage. Julian had dragged the rear quarter panel of his bright red Ferrari straight down the side of my truck's heavy steel bumper. The Ferrari's engine cut off. The silence that followed was deafening. Julian slowly opened the door and stepped out. He was wearing a tailored Italian suit, expensive loafers, and a pair of designer sunglasses even though we were underground. He looked at the massive, deep scratch running along the side of the Ferrari, then looked at my truck, which barely had a scuff on its solid steel bumper. His face flushed with anger. He took off his sunglasses and glared at me. "Are you blind, buddy? You parked over the line." I looked down at the bright yellow parking lines painted on the floor. My truck was perfectly centered in my assigned space. Julian's Ferrari was parked diagonally, crossing over the line and encroaching into my spot. "I'm perfectly inside my lines, Julian," I said, my voice steady. "You just don't know how to drive a car you clearly can't handle." Julian sneered, walking up to me, trying to use his height to intimidate me. "Do you know how much this car costs? It's a Ferrari. It's worth more than your entire miserable life. You're going to pay for this damage." "I'm not paying for anything," I replied, crossing my arms. "You hit a parked car. That's entirely your fault. I'd suggest you call your insurance company, but we both know that's going to be a very uncomfortable phone call for you." Julian's eyes narrowed. He looked me up and down, taking in my jeans and simple t-shirt. He recognized me from Lily's descriptions. "You're the ex-Mason, right? The guy who got dumped so Lily could upgrade to a real man." I didn't take the bait. I just stared at him. He chuckled, a nasty, arrogant sound. He reached into the inside pocket of his suit jacket, pulled out a sleek leather wallet, and extracted a crisp $100 bill. He threw the money at my chest. It fluttered to the concrete floor between our feet. "There," Julian said dismissively. "That should cover some touch-up paint for that piece of junk you drive. Now get out of my way. I have a gorgeous woman waiting for me upstairs in an apartment you're about to be kicked out of." He turned and started walking toward the elevator banks, completely writing me off as a minor annoyance. I looked down at the $100 bill on the floor. I didn't pick it up. I reached into my pocket, pulled out my phone, and snapped a clear picture of the Ferrari's license plate. making sure to get the massive scratch in the frame. "Hey, Julian," I called out, my voice echoing in the empty garage. He stopped and turned around, looking annoyed. "What?" "Make sure you enjoy the gala tonight," I said, my voice calm but laced with a threat he couldn't quite understand yet. "Because the clock is ticking." He rolled his eyes, flipped me off, and stepped into the elevator. I got into my truck, started the engine, and drove right over his $100 bill. I didn't care about the money. I cared about the destruction of his ego. I drove out of the garage and headed straight to a high-end whiskey bar downtown. It was time to meet Elijah and finalize the documents that would obliterate Lily, her parents, and Julian in one fell swoop. The games were over. It was time for absolute scorched-earth retaliation. The whiskey bar was dark, quiet, and smelled of polished wood and expensive bourbon. It was the kind of place where high-powered executives came to make deals out of the public eye. I walked to a private booth in the back corner. Elijah was already there, wearing a sharp navy suit, sipping a glass of Macallan. On the table in front of him sat a thick, manila folder sealed with red tape. Elijah wasn't just my best friend from college. He was a brilliant corporate lawyer, and the only person who knew the full extent of my financial portfolio. He knew about the software patents I sold 3 years ago. He knew about the aggressive investments I made. And most importantly, he knew about the real estate acquisitions I had executed under an anonymous LLC. I slid into the booth across from him. "Tell me you have it." Elijah pushed the manila folder across the table. "Everything you asked for. But Mason, are you sure you want to do this? This is the nuclear option. Once you pull this pin, there is no going back. It's going to be brutal." "They've already been brutal, Elijah," I said, untying the red tape and opening the folder. "Lily has been stealing from me to fund an affair. Her parents came into my home today and threatened me with a hypothetical lawyer and a messy divorce just to assert dominance. And her new boy toy just side-swiped my truck with a Ferrari and threw a $100 bill at me like I was a beggar." Elijah let out a low whistle. "All right then, scorched earth it is. Let's go through the documents." He pulled out the first stack of papers. They were crisp, official legal documents with heavy embossed seals. "This is the master deed and the ownership transfer documents for the Grand Horizon," Elijah said, tapping the paper. "Let me pause here and explain the ultimate secret I had been keeping from Lily. When my tech career exploded, I didn't buy sports cars or designer clothes. I invested in real estate. 2 years ago, when the Grand Horizon high-rise was struggling with bankruptcy, my LLC bought the entire building. Every single luxury apartment, the marble lobby, the underground parking garage, I owned all of it. Matthew, the arrogant building manager who locked me out, he worked for a property management company that I had hired. Technically, I paid his salary. I never told Lily because I wanted a normal relationship. I wanted her to love the guy in the jeans and t-shirt, not the multimillionaire landlord. I let us sign a standard lease for our apartment, paying rent from my personal checking account to my own LLC just to keep the paper trail looking completely normal. "The paperwork is fully finalized," Elijah continued. "Your name is now officially registered as the sole owner and acting CEO of the holding company. You have absolute, unrestricted legal authority over the building, the management staff, and every tenant lease." I nodded, a cold satisfaction settling in my chest. "Good. What about Julian?" Elijah pulled out a second, thinner file. He opened it, and a shark-like smile spread across his face. "Oh, buddy, you are going to love this. Julian is a walking financial disaster. He doesn't have a trust fund. He doesn't have an inheritance. That whole old money routine is a complete fabrication." I leaned forward, my eyes locked on the documents. "Explain." "Julian used to be a mid-level stockbroker," Elijah explained, pointing to a background check report. "He got fired 2 years ago for unethical trading practices. He's currently drowning in debt. And it gets better. He had a very nasty divorce last year. He owes over $80,000 in back child support and alimony. His ex-wife's lawyer is actively petitioning the court to garnish whatever wages he has left." "And the Ferrari?" I asked, remembering the bright red car in the garage. Least Elijah laughed. And he's 3 months behind on the payments. The dealership has already issued a repossession order. He's renting that car and wearing tailored suits to con his way into high society circles, probably looking for a rich woman to bail him out of his debt. The sheer irony of it all was staggering. Lily and her parents thought I was a poor loser, and they were throwing me away for a guy who was literally faking his wealth and drowning in legal debt. Lily was using my hard-earned salary to buy designer clothes to impress a con artist. This is perfect, I said, closing the files and sliding them into my briefcase. Absolutely perfect. So what's the play? Elijah asked, leaning back and sipping his whiskey. Do we evict them tomorrow? Fire the building manager? No, I said softly, looking at my reflection in the dark window of the bar. If I drop the hammer now, it's just a landlord kicking out a tenant. I want them to feel the exact same humiliation they put me through. I want to build them up to the highest possible peak of their arrogance, and then I want to pull the floor out from under them in front of everyone. I finished my drink and stood up. First, I'm going to become the perfect roommate. I'm going to cut off the financial life support Lily has been secretly living on. I want her to feel the panic of real life before the main event. The next morning, the execution of my plan began. I woke up at 6 a.m., my usual time. I walked into the kitchen to make coffee. Usually, I would brew a full 12-cup pot, using the expensive organic roast Lily demanded, and I would leave a customized mug of it on the counter for her when she eventually woke up at 10 a.m. Not anymore. I pulled out my single-serve French press. I scooped exactly enough cheap, store-brand coffee for 1 cup, brewed it, poured it into my travel mug, and washed the press immediately. The kitchen smelled like coffee, but there was none left for her. Then, I sat down at the kitchen island with my laptop and opened my personal bank accounts. It was time to trim the fat. I logged into my cellular provider's portal. I clicked on the Family Plan tab. There was my number, and right below it, Lily's number, utilizing unlimited data and international roaming that I paid $120 a month for. I clicked Remove Line. A warning popped up stating the line would be deactivated immediately. I hit Confirm. Just like that, Lily's lifeline to the outside world, and to Julian, was severed. Next was the car insurance. I logged into my Geico account. I removed her Honda Civic from my premium coverage plan. I didn't cancel the policy. I just removed her vehicle, effectively leaving her driving uninsured on the city streets. As a roommate, it wasn't my legal responsibility to insure her vehicle. Finally, I went to the grocery delivery app. Lily had a cart saved with over $250 worth of groceries. Filet mignon, imported cheeses, expensive wine. Set to auto-charge to my credit card at noon. I deleted the cart, removed my credit card from the app, and uninstalled it from the shared iPad. I closed my laptop, grabbed my briefcase, and headed to the office. I felt lighter than I had in years. When I returned home at 6 p.m., the apartment was a war zone. Lily was pacing the living room, her hair a mess, holding her useless iPhone in the air as if trying to catch a stray signal. "Mason," she shrieked the second I walked through the door. "What did you do to the Wi-Fi? My phone isn't working. It says no service." I calmly took off my coat and hung it in the closet. "I didn't touch the Wi-Fi, Lily. I removed your number from my family cellular plan. Since we are no longer a couple and just roommates, it doesn't make sense for me to pay your phone bill. You'll need to set up your own account with Verizon or AT&T." She stared at me, her mouth hanging open. "Are you serious? You cut off my phone without warning me? How am I supposed to call Julian? How am I supposed to contact my freelance clients?" "You can use the Wi-Fi in the apartment to send emails," I said reasonably, walking into the kitchen. "But the data plan is a personal expense. Roommates handle their own personal expenses." I opened the refrigerator. It was practically empty. I pulled out a prime ribeye steak I had bought for myself on the way home, along with some fresh asparagus. Lily followed me into the kitchen, her panic turning into anger. "And where are the groceries? The delivery guy never showed up." "I canceled the auto order," I said, seasoning my steak. I realized I was paying for a lot of food I don't eat. From now on, I'll just buy my own groceries. You can take the bottom 2 shelves of the fridge for your things. We can split the cost of toilet paper and dish soap, but food is individual now. Mason, I have $20 in my checking account, she yelled, her voice cracking. I can't afford to buy groceries right now. You know I'm waiting on a check from a client. I put my steak in the hot pan. Sizzled loudly. That sounds stressful, Lily. But as you said, we're just friends now. I can't be responsible for your financial planning. Maybe your parents can spot you some cash. Or Julian. She stormed off into her room and slammed the door. That night, I ate a perfectly cooked steak while I heard the sound of the microwave beeping in the kitchen as Lily heated up a dusty can of soup she found in the back of the pantry. The financial reality of her choices was hitting her like a freight train, but the best was yet to come. 2 days later, I came home to find Lily sitting on the couch, crying hysterically, holding a yellow piece of paper. I got pulled over, she sobbed, looking up at me. The police officer said my car insurance was invalid. He ran my plates and wrote me a $300 ticket for driving uninsured, and threatened to impound my car. Why didn't you tell me you canceled the insurance? I didn't cancel it, Lily, I said, leaning against the doorframe. I just removed your car from my policy. I assumed an independent woman like yourself would want to manage her own auto insurance. It's just part of being a responsible roommate. She buried her face in her hands. The free ride was officially over. She was drowning, and she had no one to blame but herself. But while she was panicking about groceries and traffic tickets, I was finalizing the trap that would expose her fake billionaire boyfriend to the world. While Lily was busy rationing canned soup and trying to figure out how to pay a massive traffic fine without a working cell phone, I was turning my attention back to Julian. The man who sideswiped my truck and threw a $100 bill at me needed to be dismantled piece by piece before the grand finale. Elijah had given me the raw data on Julian's financial ruin, but data is just paper. I needed to weaponize it. I needed Lily to see the truth about her upgrade, without it looking like I was a jealous ex trying to sabotage her new relationship. I needed her to discover it herself so the psychological impact would be devastating. It was Thursday evening. Lily was out, presumably using the free Wi-Fi at a local coffee shop to try and hustle some freelance work since she couldn't afford to leave the apartment otherwise. I took the thick dossier Elijah had given me regarding Julian's debts, his messy divorce, and his unpaid child support. I didn't want to leave the entire file out. That would be too obvious. Instead, I carefully extracted 3 specific documents. First, the repossession warning from the luxury car dealership regarding the leased Ferrari. It clearly stated that Julian was 90 days past due on his lease payments, owing over $8,000 in arrears, and that a recovery team had been dispatched to locate the vehicle. Second, a court summons regarding his unpaid alimony and child support, detailing a demand for over $80,000 and threatening wage garnishment. The document explicitly mentioned his lack of a trust fund or inheritance to satisfy the debt. Third, a final notice from a high-interest payday loan company, showing a balance of $15,000 borrowed at an astronomical interest rate. Julian wasn't just broke. He was a financial black hole. He was wearing tailored suits while running from repo men. Lily had a specific habit. Every morning, she would sit at the kitchen island, drink her coffee, and flip through a high-end interior design magazine that she kept meticulously fanned out on the coffee table. It was her ritual. I took the 3 documents, folded them neatly, and slipped them between the glossy pages of the magazine, right in the middle of a spread featuring luxury Italian villas. The papers protruded just enough to be noticeable, but not so much that it looked staged. It looked as if someone had hurriedly used them as a bookmark and forgotten them. Then, I went back to my room, locked the door, and waited. The next morning, I was already at the office when my phone buzzed. It was a text message from an unknown number. I opened it. Unknown Mason, it's Qley, Lily's friend. I need to talk to you, please. I raised an eyebrow. Qley was the friend from the iPad group chat who had expressed mild guilt about Lily's plan to use me for rent money. I debated ignoring it, but information is power. I sent a quick reply telling her to meet me at a diner near my office on my lunch break. At noon, I walked into the diner. Qley was already sitting in a back booth, looking incredibly nervous. She was twisting a paper napkin into shreds. I slid into the booth across from her. I didn't smile. I didn't offer pleasantries. "What do you want, Qley?" I asked flatly. She swallowed hard, refusing to meet my eyes. "Mason, I know about the roommate thing. I know what Lily is doing." I tried to tell her it was wrong, but she wouldn't listen to me. "I know exactly what she's doing, Qley," I said coldly. "I read the group chat. I saw the messages where she called me a pathetic loser and outlined her plan to use my salary to fund her life while she waited for Julian's condo to be renovated." Qley's face drained of all color. She looked absolutely horrified. You saw that? Oh my God. Mason, I'm so sorry. I swear I didn't agree with her. She's just been so obsessed with Julian and his money. She completely lost her mind. She's obsessed with a mirage," I stated, leaning back in the booth. "That's why I'm here," Qley whispered, leaning across the table. "Mason, things are getting weird. Lily was crying on the phone to me an hour ago from a payphone. She said she found some papers in her magazine this morning. Legal papers belonging to Julian." A cold, satisfied smile touched the corners of my mouth. The trap had sprung. "Is that so?" She confronted him about it. Qley continued, her voice shaking. "Julian went crazy. He screamed at her, told her she had no right snooping through his things. He denied everything, said the papers were fake, a setup by some jealous business rivals. But Lily is panicking. She asked him for a small loan to pay her traffic ticket and buy food, and he completely blew up at her, calling her a gold digger. I almost laughed out loud. The fake billionaire calling the gold digger a gold digger. It was poetic justice of the highest order. "She has no money, Mason," Qley pleaded. "Julian won't help her. Her parents are tapped out, and she can't even afford to put gas in her car. She's terrified. She wants to try and fix things with you. She's realizing she made a massive mistake." "She didn't make a mistake, Qley. She made a choice," I said, standing up from the booth. "And now she gets to live with the consequences of that choice. Tell Lily I'll see her tonight. We have a lease renewal to discuss." I walked out of the diner. The pieces were perfectly aligned on the board. The eye of the storm had passed, and the hurricane of reality was about to make landfall. It was time for the grand finale. I walked into my apartment that Friday evening expecting tension, but I walked into a full-blown ambush. The moment I opened the front door, the air in the room felt thick and suffocating. Lily was sitting on the living room sofa, her posture rigid, her arms crossed tight across her chest. Flanking her on either side were her parents, Robert and Susan. Robert was sitting in my favorite leather recliner, looking entirely too comfortable, a smug grin plastered across his face. But they weren't alone. Standing near the kitchen island, leaning against the marble countertop like he owned the place, was Julian. He was wearing another tailored suit, probably bought on a high-interest credit card, and he gave me a condescending nod as I walked in. And right by the front door, hovering like a bouncer, was Matthew, the building manager. I closed the door behind me. I didn't take off my coat. I just stood there and looked at the five of them. The sheer entitlement radiating from that room was enough to make my blood boil, but I kept my face completely blank. "Well, look who finally decided to show up," Robert said, checking his watch. "We've been waiting for you, Mason. Have a seat. We need to have a serious discussion about the future of this living arrangement." "I prefer to stand," I replied smoothly. "What is this, Robert? An intervention?" Susan scoffed loudly, adjusting her designer scarf. "Hardly. It is a business meeting. A reality check for you, Mason. Lily's lease on this apartment is up for renewal at the end of the month. The management office sent the paperwork upstairs today." Matthew stepped forward, puffing out his chest. He held a clipboard in his hand. "That is correct. Management needs an answer by Monday morning regarding the renewal of Unit 402. And quite frankly, Mason, given your recent hostile behavior toward the primary resident, I am heavily advising Lily to reconsider having you on the new lease at all. I looked at Matthew, the absolute fool. He had taken Lily's bribes and thrown his lot in with a woman who had $20 to her name, completely unaware that he was threatening the man who signed his paychecks. Is that so? I asked, shifting my gaze to Lily. You want me off the lease? Lily looked down at her hands, playing the part of the stressed, overwhelmed victim. Mason, things are just too difficult right now. You cut off my phone. You took me off the car insurance. You refused to help me with groceries when my freelance money dried up. You are creating a toxic environment for me. Julian has been incredibly supportive through all of this emotional abuse you are putting me through. Julian stepped forward, sliding his arm around Lily's shoulders in a sickening display of fake protection. Listen to me, buddy, Julian said, his voice dripping with fake authority. Lily is a delicate woman. She deserves a stable, luxurious life, not some bitter ex-boyfriend trying to control her with his average salary. We have decided that it is best for everyone if you move out. I raised an eyebrow. You decided? Julian, you don't even live here. And Lily, you just told Qley yesterday that you have absolutely zero money. How exactly are you planning to pay the rent on a luxury downtown apartment without my average salary? Lily's face flushed bright red. She shot a panicked look at Julian, then at her father. Robert cleared his throat aggressively, standing up from my recliner. That is none of your concern, Mason, Robert barked. We are family. We take care of our own. But since you are the one who caused this emotional distress, you are going to do the right thing. You are going to sign the lease renewal guaranteeing the payments for the next 12 months. It is the least you can do after wasting 3 years of my daughter's life. Susan nodded vigorously in agreement. Exactly. You owe her that financial security. You will pay the rent, but you will vacate the premises. Julian's condo is currently undergoing a massive renovation, and he needs a comfortable place to stay. You will hand over your keys, and Julian will move into the master bedroom with Lily until they are ready to purchase a permanent estate together. Maybe then you can finally stop holding your little paychecks over her head. I stood there in complete silence. My mind was processing the sheer magnitude of their delusion. They wanted me to sign a legal contract binding me to pay thousands of dollars a month in rent, so that my ex-girlfriend and her fake billionaire boyfriend could live in my apartment for free. Let me make sure I understand this, I said, my voice dangerously quiet. You want me to guarantee the lease. You want me to pay 100% of the rent. And you want me to hand over the keys to my home so Julian can live here with you. Is that your final demand? It is not a demand, Mason, Matthew chimed in, tapping his pen against his clipboard. It is a requirement for a smooth transition. If you refuse, I will personally see to it that you are forcefully evicted for creating a hostile living environment. I have the authority to call the police and have you removed for harassing another tenant. Do you want a messy legal battle? Because Julian has a phenomenal lawyer who handles high-profile divorce and custody cases. He will crush you in court. They had played their hand. They had pushed all their chips to the center of the table, entirely confident that they held all the winning cards. I reached into my leather briefcase. My fingers brushed against the thick manila folder tied with red string. I gripped it firmly and pulled it out. Matthew, I said, my voice echoing loudly off the hardwood floors. You are absolutely right about one thing. Management does need an answer today. I walked over to the kitchen island and dropped the heavy folder onto the marble counter. The slap of the thick paper cutting through the tense silence of the room made everyone flinch. What is that? Robert demanded, narrowing his eyes at the red tape. If that is some kind of legal threat, I am warning you, Mason, Julian's family has more money than you will see in 10 lifetimes. I ignored Robert. I untied the red string and opened the folder. I pulled out the first document, a crisp, legally notarized letter, and slid it across the marble counter toward Matthew. Read it, Matthew, I commanded. Matthew sneered, picking up the paper with arrogant reluctance. He looked at the letterhead, then scanned the first few lines. I watched his eyes. I watched the exact second his brain registered the words printed on the page. His arrogant sneer vanished, replaced by a look of profound, unadulterated horror. The blood drained from his face so fast he looked like a ghost. His hands started to visibly tremble, the paper rattling loudly in the quiet room. I don't understand, Matthew stammered, his voice suddenly small and reedy. He looked from the paper to me, his eyes wide with panic. This says the LLC, the ownership group. Read it out loud, Matthew, I said, my voice hard as steel. Let the room hear it. Matthew swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing. He looked at Lily, then at Julian, completely terrified. It is a formal declaration of ownership, Matthew read, his voice shaking violently. It states that Mason is the sole proprietor and acting CEO of Horizon Holdings LLC, the entity that owns this entire building. A pin drop would have sounded like a gunshot. Lily stopped breathing. Her eyes widened to the size of saucers, darting from Matthew to me, trying to process an impossible reality. Robert and Susan froze like statues, their mouths hanging open. Julian was the first to speak. He let out a nervous, forced laugh. What kind of fake document did you print off the internet, buddy? You own a luxury high-rise? Give me a break. You drive a beat-up Ford. I pulled out the master property deed with the heavy gold embossed seal of the city and slapped it onto the counter next to the letter. I drive a Ford because I choose to, Julian, I said, stepping closer to him, closing the distance until I was looking down into his eyes. I don't need to lease a Ferrari I can't afford to prove my worth. I bought this building 2 years ago. Every brick, every window, every square foot of marble in that lobby belongs to me. I am the landlord. I turned my attention back to my ex-girlfriend. Lily was physically shaking. The arrogant, demanding woman from 2 minutes ago had vanished. You see, Lily, I said, keeping my voice terrifyingly calm. I wanted a partner who loved me for who I was, not what I could buy her. So I hid my wealth. I let us sign a standard lease to keep things normal. I paid the rent out of my personal account into my business account. It was a test of character. A test you failed the moment you asked to be roommates so you could drain my salary to fund your affair. Susan grabbed the edge of the sofa, looking like she was about to faint. You're a multimillionaire? But your clothes, your job. My job is highly lucrative, Susan, I said coldly. And my investments are even more so. But you were too busy worshipping a fraud to notice. I turned back to Matthew, who was sweating profusely, looking desperately for a way out. Matthew, I said, you accepted bribes from a tenant. You illegally deactivated the keycard of the building owner. You threatened me with the police in my own property. You are fired. Effective immediately. Leave your master keys and your clipboard on that counter and get out of my building before I press criminal charges for extortion. Matthew didn't argue. He didn't say a single word. He practically threw his keys onto the marble island, spun around, and sprinted out the front door, leaving it wide open behind him. The power dynamic in the room hadn't just shifted. It had completely shattered. I was no longer the pathetic ex-boyfriend they were trying to bully. I was the absolute authority. As for that lease renewal, I said, looking directly at Lily, who had tears welling up in her eyes. There is no renewal. I am formally withdrawing my consent to allow you to reside in this unit. Your free ride is officially over. Mason, please, Lily begged, her voice cracking. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know. We can fix this. I still love you, Mason. I was just confused. Julian meant nothing to me. He was just a distraction because you were always working. She threw Julian under the bus without a second thought the moment she realized I was the actual prize. Julian's face contorted in anger. Excuse me? A distraction? You've been begging me to let you move in for a month. Speaking of Julian, I interrupted, raising my hand to silence them both. I pulled out my phone and checked the time. Right on schedule. I walked over to the floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the front entrance of the building. I pointed down at the street. Come take a look, everyone. Julian, I think your ride is here. Julian frowned, walking hesitantly toward the window. Robert and Susan followed closely behind him. Down on the street, pulling up directly in front of the glass lobby doors, was a sleek, midnight black Porsche 911 Turbo. It was a magnificent piece of engineering, and it didn't belong to a rental company. It belonged to Samuel, a prominent billionaire venture capitalist and one of my major business partners. Who is that? Robert asked, his voice trembling as he looked at the sheer wealth displayed on the street below. That is Samuel, I said, watching as the billionaire stepped out of his Porsche, handing the keys to the valet. He is here for a business meeting with me. And Julian, I believe he is going to be very, very surprised to see you. Julian stared down at the street, his eyes locking onto the figure of Samuel walking into the lobby. I saw the exact moment the realization hit Julian. The arrogant, slick exterior melted away, leaving behind pure, unadulterated panic. He stepped back from the window, breathing heavily, his hands suddenly finding their way into his pockets. I have to go, Julian stammered, turning toward the door. I just remembered I have a very important conference call. International clients. Oh, don't leave yet, Julian, I said, moving to block the doorway. Samuel is coming right up. You two should definitely catch up. Move out of my way, Mason, Julian demanded, trying to sound tough, but his voice cracked in the middle of the sentence. Before he could push past me, the elevator doors down the hall chimed loudly. Heavy, confident footsteps approached our open apartment door. Samuel walked in. He was a man in his late 60s, with silver hair, wearing a perfectly tailored navy suit that screamed authentic, generational wealth. He exuded power without having to say a word. Samuel looked around the room, taking in the chaotic scene. His eyes swept past Robert and Susan, dismissed Lily entirely, and landed directly on me. He smiled warmly and extended his hand. Mason, my boy, Samuel said, his booming voice filling the room as we shook hands. Good to see you. I brought the finalized contracts for the new cybersecurity acquisition. But it looks like I interrupted a family gathering. Not a family gathering, Samuel, I replied, gesturing toward Julian, who was trying to shrink back into the shadows near the kitchen. Just a few tenants who are in the process of vacating. I believe you might recognize one of them. Samuel turned his sharp gaze toward the kitchen. He narrowed his eyes, studying Julian's face for a long moment. Then, a harsh, bark-like laugh escaped his lips. Well, Samuel said, his tone dripping with absolute disdain. If it isn't Julian. I haven't seen you since you were escorted out of my brokerage firm by security 2 years ago. Robert and Susan gasped simultaneously. Lily looked at Julian, her face pale with confusion. Brokerage firm? Julian, what is he talking about? Samuel didn't wait for Julian to answer. He stepped fully into the room, dominating the space. This man used to work as a low-level broker at my firm. We fired him for gross incompetence and suspected embezzlement. He cost my clients a fortune. That's a lie, Julian shouted, his face turning red. But he wouldn't meet Samuel's eyes. A lie? Samuel challenged, stepping closer to Julian. Should we call your ex-wife and ask her if it's a lie? I heard through the grapevine about your messy divorce. I heard she got full custody of the kids because the judge saw right through your pathetic finances. Tell me, Julian, have you paid that $80,000 in back child support yet? Or are you still hiding from the court-appointed lawyer trying to garnish your wages? Susan gripped Robert's arm, looking like she was going to be sick. Divorce? Child support? Julian, you told us you had a massive inheritance from your grandfather. You told us you were starting a venture capital firm. Samuel laughed again, a cruel, mocking sound. Inheritance? His grandfather left him a rusted tractor and a mountain of debt. This man doesn't have a dime to his name. Let me guess, he's driving a rented sports car and wearing a suit he bought on credit? He's a professional parasite. Lily turned to Julian, tears of humiliation streaming down her face. Is it true? Julian, tell me he's lying. Tell me about the condo you're renovating for us. Julian looked trapped. He looked at Samuel, who was glaring at him with wealthy contempt. He looked at me, realizing I had orchestrated his complete exposure. And then he looked at Lily, dropping his fake, caring persona instantly. Oh, shut up, Lily, Julian snarled, his true colors finally showing. You really think I was going to let you move in with me? You're broke. You don't even have a job. You were just a fun distraction while I was trying to network in this building. I was hoping your stupid ex-boyfriend actually had money I could tap into. The brutal honesty hit Lily like a physical blow. She staggered backward, putting a hand over her mouth to stifle a sob. She had thrown away a man who loved her and owned the entire building, all for a broke con artist who was just using her for networking. Robert stepped forward, trying to salvage some shred of dignity. Now see here, Julian, you cannot speak to my daughter that way. Julian sneered at Robert. Save it, old man. You two are just as pathetic as she is, looking for a free meal ticket. Julian realized the game was entirely up. He shoved past Robert, practically sprinting for the open front door. Run fast, Julian. I called out after him as he reached the hallway. The repo men are waiting in the garage for your leased Ferrari. He didn't look back. He just jumped into the elevator and disappeared. I turned back to the room. The silence was heavy, filled with the devastating weight of ruined pride and broken illusions. Robert and Susan looked absolutely crushed. Their dreams of high society and trust funds shattered into a million pieces. Lily was crying uncontrollably on the sofa, her face buried in her hands. Well, Samuel said, adjusting his suit jacket. That was certainly entertaining. Shall we head to your office, Mason, and review these contracts? In a moment, Samuel, I said. I pulled out my phone and dialed a number I had saved specifically for this exact moment. The phone rang twice before it was answered. David, I said, speaking clearly into the receiver. I need you at the Grand Horizon immediately. Yes. Apartment 402. Bring Sheriff Carter with you. We have unauthorized individuals refusing to vacate the premises, and a documented history of harassment and attempted extortion. I hung up the phone and slipped it back into my pocket. Lily's head snapped up. Her mascara was running down her cheeks, making her look like a terrified raccoon. Mason, please. You don't have to do this. We can talk. We can go to counseling. I made a mistake. You made 100 choices, Lily. I corrected her coldly. Every time you swiped my credit card, every time you let your parents insult me, every time you snuck out to meet a fraud, you made a choice. Now the bill is due. Robert tried to puff his chest out one last time, though his voice lacked its usual arrogant boom. You can't just throw us out onto the street, Mason. There are tenant laws. You have to give us 30 days' notice. I shook my head, feeling absolutely zero pity for the man. Actually, Robert, standard tenant laws apply to leaseholders in good standing. Lily's lease expired yesterday. Furthermore, bribing building staff to lock out the property owner constitutes a severe security violation, which gives me the legal right to execute an immediate, emergency eviction. My lawyer and the police are on their way right now to enforce it. Susan burst into tears, grabbing Lily's arm. Lily, do something. Apologize to him. We can't be thrown out like common criminals. But there was nothing Lily could do. The power was entirely out of her hands. 10 minutes later, the heavy footsteps of law enforcement echoed down the hallway. My lawyer, David, a sharp man in a gray suit, walked in alongside Sheriff Carter, a no-nonsense officer with his hand resting casually on his utility belt. Mr. Mason, David said, nodding professionally. I have the emergency eviction order signed by the judge. The premises must be vacated immediately. Sheriff Carter stepped forward, looking at the crying women and the defeated older man. All right, folks, you heard the lawyer. It's time to pack a bag and head out. You have exactly 10 minutes to gather your essential personal belongings. Anything left behind can be collected next week under police supervision. 10 minutes. Lily shrieked, panic overtaking her. I have thousands of dollars worth of clothes in my closet. My computers, My design equipment. 10 minutes, ma'am, Sheriff Carter repeated firmly, crossing his arms. Start packing, or you will leave with nothing but the clothes on your back. The reality of the situation finally broke them. Lily scrambled off the sofa and sprinted into her bedroom, throwing designer dresses and expensive shoes into a single suitcase with frantic, desperate energy. Susan followed her, crying and helping her grab jewelry and makeup. Robert just stood in the living room, staring at the floor, utterly defeated by the average guy he had spent years insulting. I stood near the door with Samuel, watching the chaotic scene unfold. There was no joy in watching them suffer, only the profound, clean satisfaction of justice. They had tried to drain my life, and instead, they had lost everything. 9 minutes later, Lily emerged from the bedroom, dragging a massive, overstuffed suitcase. Her face was red and splotchy. She looked at me one last time. There was no anger left in her eyes, only deep, agonizing regret. Mason, she whispered, her voice breaking. I lost the best thing that ever happened to me. Didn't I? I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I just looked at her and delivered the final, undeniable truth. Yes, Lily, you did. Sheriff Carter escorted the three of them out of the apartment, down the elevator, and out into the cold night air. I stood at the floor-to-ceiling window and watched them drag their suitcases down the sidewalk, walking away from the luxury life they thought they deserved, completely broken and humiliated. This is the moment that changes everything, the moment I finally took back control of my life. Thank you so much for your patience and for staying with me until now. You've been amazing. Please give this video a like and comment one below to let me know you've made it this far. Not only does this help more people find this story, but it also lets me know that my experiences truly mean something to someone. Your support is my greatest motivation to keep sharing the rest of this journey. The next morning, I woke up early. The apartment was completely silent. There was no expensive organic coffee brewing, no sound of reality television echoing from the living room, no underlying tension hanging in the air. For the first time in 18 months, I took a deep breath, and the air in my own home felt clean. I didn't waste a single minute. I called a professional moving company and a high-end furniture store. By noon, a crew had arrived to clear out every piece of furniture in the living room and the master bedroom. I didn't want a single reminder of Lily left in the space. I replaced the soft, overly decorative couches she had chosen with sleek, dark leather furniture. I changed the artwork. I completely reclaimed my territory. Next, I handled the security. I called a locksmith and had the physical locks on my apartment door changed. Then I went down to the building's management office. The staff was incredibly nervous. Word had spread like wildfire about what happened to Matthew the night before. I walked into the main office, taking a seat at the heavy oak desk that Matthew used to occupy. I formally processed Matthew's termination paperwork. I ensured that his security clearance was permanently revoked and that he was blacklisted from every major property management firm in the city. You don't take bribes to lock an owner out of their own property and walk away with your career intact. Over the next few days, my phone was bombarded with messages. Lily tried to call me from dozens of different numbers. She sent desperate, rambling text messages apologizing, begging for a second chance, promising she would get a job and pay me back for everything she had taken. She even sent emails to my corporate account, crying about how she was staying on a friend's couch and had nowhere else to go. I didn't reply to a single one. I didn't block her immediately either. I simply let the messages pile up in a folder. I wanted a documented record of her harassment just in case I needed it for a restraining order down the line. I maintained absolute, terrifying silence. When someone shows you exactly who they are, you don't engage in negotiations. You simply close the door and lock it forever. 3 months passed. Spring arrived, melting away the bitter cold of winter. My life had settled into a highly productive, peaceful rhythm. My tech company had just secured a massive government contract, and my real estate portfolio was generating incredible returns. One Tuesday afternoon, I was grabbing a quick lunch at a deli near my office. As I waited for my sandwich, I heard someone call my name. I turned around and saw Qley. She looked tired, carrying a stack of files for her accounting job. I nodded politely. I held no ill will toward Qley. She had warned me about Lily's breakdown at the end, after all. "Mason, hi," Qley said, stepping closer. "It's good to see you. You look great. Really great." "Thanks, Qley. I'm doing well," I replied. She hesitated, looking around the busy deli. "I haven't talked to Lily in over a month. None of our friend group has. But I thought you might want to know what happened to her family." "It's bad, Mason. Really bad." I took my sandwich from the counter and gestured for her to walk outside with me. We stood on the sidewalk under the warm sun. "What happened?" Qley took a deep breath. "You remember how Julian was drowning in debt? Before he disappeared that night, he managed to convince Lily that if he could just clear one massive legal hurdle, his inheritance would unlock. He told her he desperately needed $50,000 to pay off a court settlement, or he was going to jail." I shook my head, already seeing where this was going. "And she gave it to him." "Worse," Qley whispered, her eyes wide. "Lily didn't have the money, so she went to her parents. She cried, manipulated them, and told them Julian was her future husband and he was just caught up in a nasty legal trap set by his jealous ex-wife. Robert and Susan believed her. They believed the illusion of the billionaire. They gave him the money?" I asked, genuinely shocked by the level of their stupidity. "They liquidated everything, Mason," Qley said, her voice filled with pity. "They drained their entire retirement savings. They even emptied the college fund they had set aside for Lily's younger brother. They gave Julian a cashier's check for $60,000. I stood there on the sidewalk, stunned by the absolute destruction Lily had brought upon her own blood. And Julian? He cashed the check the next morning and disappeared. Completely ghosted her. Changed his number, abandoned the rented Ferrari at a gas station, and vanished. He used her parents' life savings to flee the state and escape his child support warrants." The irony was heavy and bitter. They had sneered at my honest salary, calling me a poor loser. They had demanded I provide for their daughter while she chased a fantasy. And in the end, that fantasy had bankrupted their entire family. "Robert and Susan are completely ruined," Qley continued. "Robert had to take a second job working nights at a warehouse just to cover their mortgage. Susan is having a nervous breakdown. The stress was too much, and they are currently filing for a very messy, bitter divorce. They blame Lily for everything. They kicked her out of their house. She's living in a cheap motel on the edge of the city, working shifts at a diner to survive." I looked out at the busy street, watching the cars go by. I felt no joy in hearing about their destruction. But I also felt no pity. The universe has a way of balancing the scales. They worshipped greed, and greed had consumed them entirely. "Thanks for telling me, Qley," I said quietly. "Take care of yourself." I walked back to my office, closing the final chapter on Lily and her toxic family forever. With the past firmly behind me, my future opened up in ways I never expected. A month after running into Qley, my company announced a massive expansion, and I received a significant promotion to Chief Technology Officer. I was busier than ever, but it was a fulfilling, purposeful kind of busy. To clear my head on the weekends, I joined a local hiking group. That is where I met Rebecca. Rebecca was 30 years old, working as an emergency room nurse. She was smart, funny, and incredibly grounded. She didn't wear expensive designer clothes. She wore practical hiking boots and flannel shirts. She didn't talk about reality television or country clubs. She talked about books, her patience, and her goals for the future. Our first date wasn't at an expensive steakhouse. It was at a small, family-owned Italian place in her neighborhood. When the bill came, I reached for my wallet out of habit. Rebecca gently put her hand over mine and slid her credit card onto the tray. "I've got this one, Mason. You drove us here and I picked the restaurant. It's only fair." I looked at her, genuinely surprised. For 3 years, my credit card had been a magic wand that solved everyone's problems. Having a woman look me in the eye and insist on carrying her own weight was a revelation. "Are you sure?" I asked. "Absolutely." She smiled, a warm, genuine smile that reached her eyes. "I work hard for my money, and I like treating the people I enjoy spending time with." That was the foundation of our relationship. It was a true partnership. When I worked late, Rebecca would come over to my apartment and cook dinner. But she didn't expect me to clean up the mess entirely on my own afterward. We stood in the kitchen together, washing dishes, talking about our days, laughing. She never asked me about my salary. She never asked me what kind of car I drove before she agreed to go out with me. When she eventually found out that I owned the Grand Horizon building, she wasn't greedy or overly impressed. She just smiled and said, "That explains why you're always so busy negotiating contracts. I'm proud of you, Mason." She loved the man, not the wallet. She respected my time, my energy, and my boundaries. Being with Rebecca taught me what a healthy, balanced relationship actually looked like. It wasn't about providing an endless stream of resources to an entitled dependent. It was about standing shoulder to shoulder with an equal, building a life together. I am standing on the balcony of my penthouse apartment right now. The sun is setting over the city, casting a warm, golden glow across the skyline. The air is cool, and I am holding a cup of coffee that I brewed myself. Looking back on the last few years, the journey from that dark bedroom where I was told I was nothing more than a roommate and a paycheck, to standing here today, feels almost surreal. The pain of betrayal is a heavy anchor, but if you have the strength to cut the chain, it can become the fuel that launches you forward. I learned the hard way that you cannot buy loyalty, and you certainly cannot buy love. When you sacrifice your own self-respect to appease someone else's greed, you don't become their hero. You become their hostage. The moment I stopped accepting the disrespect, the moment I established my boundaries and enforced them with absolute authority, my life transformed. True value isn't found in a leased sports car or a fake trust fund. True value is built with quiet hard work, integrity, and the courage to walk away from tables where respect is no longer being served. Thank you for sticking around and listening to my story. I know it was a long journey, but it is one I felt I needed to share. I hope this resonated with you in some way. I hope that if you are currently pouring your energy and your resources into someone who doesn't appreciate you, this story gives you the strength to stand up and reclaim your life. Have you ever found yourself in a similar situation? Have you ever given everything to someone, only to realize they were just using you? I want to read your experiences in the comments. And for those of you who made it all the way to the very end of this video, you belong to a special group. You belong to the 1% Club. I want you to drop the letter W in the comments right now. That W stands for winner. It is our secret sign to recognize the incredible, dedicated people who stay focused and see things through to the very end. I will be looking for those W's and responding to you. Please don't forget to hit that like button and follow the channel so we can continue this journey together in the next story. Until then, stay strong, know your worth, and never settle for being a roommate in your own life.